Thank you everybody for coming out tonight. We're super excited to be chatting with you. My name's Tom Vangel. I'm going to be the moderator for this evening. I lead our sales organization here in the US at Dash0. For those unfamiliar, Dash0 is an OTel native observability platform and AI SRE agent platform. I'm joined by my customer and friend, Josh Browder. Josh leads the site reliability organization at a company called iSpot. They're an advertising technology company, essentially helping advertisers measure business impact on all of their streaming and TV advertisements. I'm also joined on my left by Dash0's co-founder and CEO, Mirko Novakovic. And yeah, we're going to have a conversation today about a few things. We're going to talk a bit about kind of like the background of each organization and the problems that we've helped iSpot solve. We'll talk a little bit about their migration from Datadog onto OpenTelemetry and then onto Dash0. And then we'll talk a bit about AI, right? Because it wouldn't be 2026 in the house of AI without talking about everybody's two favorite letters. So sit back, relax, enjoy the conversation, and we'll definitely save time at the end for questions. But if anybody has anything pressing that they'd like to, interject and speak, just feel free to raise your hand, and we'll just kind of ham and egg it that way. Sound good? You guys ready? Yeah. Cool. All right, Josh, do you want to kick us off by just giving us the quick version on iSpot? Hopefully I didn't botch it, but maybe tell us what does the platform do? The infrastructure footprint, the team you run, kind of day to day.
Yeah, I think one mic might be better. Back.
Oh, okay.
Here.
Just use one.
Yeah. All right, so mic is very sensitive. All right. So iSpot is a ad measurement company like Tom talked about. Ultimately, we're a big data processing company. We do a lot of ETL. At the end of the day, what that means is a lot of Spark on EKS on AWS, and then a lot of ETL to Snowflake as our sort of two big data providers. At the end of all this, we are trying to deliver, we call them outcomes data. It's conversions. In the marketplace, it's called the return on ad spend. That's the main KPI. That's basically meaning we correlated, someone saw an ad and then they drove an outcome, purchase, etc. At super large scale, we probably turn to 100,000 EC2 instances in one region in a day, and then we scale down to basically the EKS control plane nodes at the end of the day. Part of the Datadog sort of conversation at the start was for us to actively monitor our entire environment in Datadog. This was kind of the crux of it, was the Datadog agent. And with Spark, we would run, one job would turn into, let's say, 32 EC2 nodes, and we wanted the agent on all of them because we want to understand what's going on in all the jobs. And then because we're so dynamic and ephemeral, we might end up paying for 3 hours of an agent or of a Datadog agent for that one job that lasted 65 minutes. So, and that's just the timing at the end of the day, just because of Datadog's pricing model of, unique agent per hour. And that's kind of what the rub, if you will. I actually talked to some fancy VP of product at Datadog about, can you help us bridge this gap? Ultimately, I was told no. And then I immediately tried to pivot towards, I just want to embrace OpenTelemetry, just because now's the time. Big fan of open standards. It's CNCF backed, all the hallmark good items out there. And really the impact was I reduced loved Datadog's tooling, didn't really like their price tag. And I remember talking to our CFO about our Datadog bill, and it was just like hard to justify that big price tag. And Dash0 came in, and I was able to get the finances met. We embraced OpenTelemetry, and then we were able to actually do more with a lot less. Later, we'll talk about our iSpot's product called Sage. It's an AI product. It's actually many products, but yeah, that's kind of the big overview of iSpot in our journey from Datadog to Dash0.
Awesome. Thanks, Josh. Mirko, over to you. You've been in the observability space for nearly 3 decades now. This isn't the first company you founded. Could you share a little bit about your background, kind of how you arrived at building Dash0 and kind of like what's to come with Dash0?
Yeah, absolutely. Feel old now with 3 decades, but it's the truth. Started my career end of the 90s and was in the observability space. At the time it was called APM from day one with the tool called Wiley Introscope, founded by Lou Cerny, who then founded New Relic. And since then, I've always stayed in that business. I was the largest reseller of Dynatrace and AppDynamics, founded an observability company called Instana. We sold to IBM end of 2020. And then I promised my wife to never do observability again. And 3 years later, she said, please do something. And I started an observability company again, and with the idea of building an observability platform based on OpenTelemetry. So OpenTelemetry was already invented during the Instana times, and I know how hard it is to pivot from your proprietary technology and agents towards OpenTelemetry. So I thought it makes sense to start a company where everything, the data model, the pipelines, the agents, everything is based on OpenTelemetry. The data is never converted. We make high usage of the semantic convention, which creates context. And then obviously we started 3 years ago. AI became a big thing, and it turns out that OpenTelemetry is also good with AI because the LLMs are trained on that open standard. The semantic convention makes sense to create context. So we built an AI SRE agent and agentic observability on top.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing. So Josh, back to you. So you talked, I think you had just said like you liked Datadog, didn't like the price tag. I think like we've heard that from like several engineering teams. I'm curious like what measures you guys took to try to combat that, and like how did you guys arrive at finally like ripping the Band-Aid off and making the change? Like what was like the underlying problems that you were having, and like what measures did you take?
Sure. So one of the measures we had to take is I had a budget. I have to justify all the spend to our CFO. At the end of the day, what we were doing is we were choosing not to observe parts of our stack because we wanted to observe more parts of the stack, or more important parts. So like, for example, I talked about our Spark workload. I actually turned off Datadog agent in I would call our business critical Spark workload. If that doesn't run, we basically don't have a product. It doesn't matter if our Dash is down, we just don't have data. So we pivoted parts of that spend to our dashboard and API, which is where customers actually consume our data. And that was just a hard pill to swallow at the end of the day, because now we're blind when Spark jobs go awry, etc. If anyone's tried to run Spark at scale, it's a bit challenging. I hear some laughter. Just imagine, hundreds of terabytes in a given day, and if one piece of the puzzle goes wrong, where do you start? It's needle in a haystack. But That's kind of the hard truth. And like I said before, I actually tried to pivot to using OTel in the stack under Datadog's billing. But what happened is they actually changed their billing model underneath us. So at one point, the OTel ingestion was free, and then they decided it's just at a slightly lower rate of their proprietary agent. And anyways, that was kind of the final burn, if you will. And at that point, Ethan, who's our sales rep on Dash0, he literally, I think, cold called me 3-4 times a day in a row to like my cell phone. I finally answered him. And he's like, hey, Dash0, and talk to me about it. And I was like, what's the billing model? And the best part was it's public. You could just do the math. I don't need to have a degree in Datadog algebra to understand the billing. If you try to do the algorithm or the math there, it's just hard to understand. And then I basically set out some really aggressive goals. So for the time of the year, at this point, this was like November. As people probably understand, ad measurement, we're driven by live sports. Super Bowl's around the corner. It's like the biggest time of the year. So I basically said, we have an aggressive deadline. Our Datadog contract ends in February. I want to be fully migrated off of it onto Dash0, which means we need to get on OTel as well, in effectively between like Christmas and beginning of February, which was an aggressive goal. But at the end of the day, we ran internal hackathon led by Dash0. Vitor is not here, but he's SA. Yeah. SA. Very talented individual. We built a mini SRE hackathon. We spent 4 hours on it. Effectively, I got the whole SRE team, which is about 10 people at this point, fully on board with the OTel toolchain and then getting that data into Dash0. The hackathon was really focused on OTel, less about Dash0. But it landed very well, which then allowed us to, we migrated from 0 to 100% in, it's about 30 days. And then we're able to throw the Datadog account into read-only mode. And I personally didn't think it was possible, but it was. So really excited about that one.
Awesome. So you talked a little bit about the commercial model. You talked a little bit about OpenTelemetry as well too, and some of the hackathon approach that we had taken. I think Mirko, for you, talk to us a bit about two things. Like number one, having this the thought process of having the simple, transparent pricing model and some of the problems we were trying to solve there, as well as it's not by any means a free investment of your team's time to go in, sit down with an engineering team like iSpot and offer not necessarily a free trial of our product or anything like that, but more so free OpenTelemetry consulting and helping them get on a standard that would allow them portability, because obviously that's a huge risk of potentially losing them as a customer before they even become a customer.
Yeah, I think one of the challenges as a vendor like ourselves is that you basically create an incentive model that, every vendor essentially you pay for the data you're sending to the tool, right? Either in gigabytes or you count. We do count, and I can explain why I think it's better. You pay for 1 million logs or 1 million traces. But at the end of the day, that creates an incentive model where we are incentivized if the customer sends us more data. And in observability, 90% of the data is garbage. And so, but as a vendor, you try to make it not really transparent that there is garbage, because obviously you get incentivized that people pay for it. So what we try to do is, and you can't really change that model, right? Because we pay for storage and compute, and if you send us data, we need to get money for it. But what we are trying to do is we give you tools to make it as transparent as possible to see where the data is created, which data is created, and we give you very easy tools to remove that data from the tool. We call that spam filters, very similar to email, right? You see logs, debug level, you think I don't need them, you click on it, gone, right? And you don't pay for them anymore. So that's the transparency, right? We don't hide where the cost is created. We give you all the tools to see exactly where the data is created, and we give you tools to remove it. That's kind of helps you. And then the other thing is, and that's why we also help you, is we don't have commitments. So there's no yearly contract, no 2-year, 3-year contract. You pay as you go, and you can switch to another vendor any day. So if you stop sending data today, you don't pay us anymore. And because you're on OpenTelemetry, you can switch easily, just pointing the collector to a different tool that is also OpenTelemetry based. So that means, and I do this, the VCs didn't like it at the beginning, right? Because it's better if you have these long-term contracts. But one thing I learned in my previous contract where we had those long-term contracts, it is very hard to keep you motivated as a vendor once you have signed a 3-year contract, right? I mean, because you can't churn anymore, right? And so I wanted to keep that, I wanted to keep us honest, right? If you are a customer and you can switch every day, we have to be on top of it every day, right? And that's why we provide those resources like these forward deployed engineers or solution architects that help customers move to OpenTelemetry, because we think we have a good tool, and if we provide value, you will stay with us, and we have to do that every day. So Vitor or whoever is still there, right, to support the team at iSpot and help you to get the right value out of it, because you can churn if you want.
Thanks, Mirko. Josh, you talked a little bit about the migration, cutting over between Christmas and the Super Bowl, right? Like, obviously that's a huge event for your business as well. Talk to us a little bit about like the day-to-day, like you'd mentioned a little bit about the product, a little bit about the people, but like talk to us about like what actually manifested in the day-to-day, the approach, like the process of doing this, things that went well, like things that you'd change if you could do it over again. And yeah, we'll go from there.
Yeah, so the day-to-day, one of the challenges is we have all this data and we pay all this money. What value does it really bring? How do I get signal from all the noise, as Mirko was talking about? 90% of the data is effectively junk. I will say the spam filter feature, I'm sure everyone in this room has felt this pain. Dev turns debug on into a noisy job, and then you don't recognize it until a couple days. You pay all that ingestion. That spam feature, like all that just disappears. If you don't want it, mark it as spam, no problem. That's happened more than a few times, especially last year. But anyhow, I would say now that we're on fully OTel and it's very standard and rigid, we actually gain the benefit of also being effectively on APM, because now in our Python code I have the OTel agent loaded because it's effectively free and necessary to actually do the job. When you combine that richness of data, I personally really use their MCP day to day. Incredibly powerful, especially we're also on AWS, so we use a lot of Kiro. I hook that up to a number of other MCPs, code repositories, bring additional steering, etc. I can, I'll maybe bring a story to this. A couple of weeks ago, we had an engineering on site, all product engineering, probably the first time in iSpot's history where both orgs were physically in the same location. After one of the days, we went to a local brewery. Most people had a good time. I was sober. And no other reason, I just don't really drink. But anyhow, long story short, we get pages of Sev1 dashboards down. Using what I talked about with Kiro and specifically Dash0's MCP, I actually found the source of the problem in the first 30 seconds. I then spent the next hour sort of not believing what I found because it didn't make logical sense. But at the end of the day, I found it in the back of a car with a lot of interesting people having a good time. So that's just like some of the power. And at the end of the day, MCP, as folks in this room are aware, that's kind of where that's like the superpower, is all that additional context you can bring to a reasoning model like an Opus, for example. Anyhow.
Yeah, it's great to hear like the power of the MCP, right? It's a little bit of this like next era and next wave of observability. I think like when we work with a lot of customers like iSpot, folks that are moving off of a solution, albeit Datadog or any of the other legacy vendors, like a lot of times they want like we'll call it like feature parity, or making sure that they have every single piece of functionality that existed in the old into the new. Talk to us a little bit about like your findings of shifting from Datadog to Dash0. Was there feature parity? Was there not feature parity? Were there different things available like the MCP server? Like talk to us a little bit about that.
Sure. So admittedly, iSpot was pretty infant in the observability space. We didn't really use a lot of the like really advanced features of Datadog, but we paid, obviously that price tag. So when I ran the sort of feature parity, even 6 months ago, the only thing missing that we're actively using that I would call a critical requirement was really RUM. And we were just using that just to monitor our a dashboard being up or down effectively. But that was the only truly missing feature. And during that conversation, it was already on the roadmap. There was already a committed date, so it was not something we would be lacking for long. And then, it was kind of a no-brainer. Got the price tag, got the feature parity. We had this now MCP additional layer. It was kind of, and then the timeline being very aggressive. That was kind of the, the song that was wrote, let's say.
Yeah, it's been exciting to see. You guys joined on, I think, officially as customers in February. Since then, I believe the team has scaled from the SRE team to now over 80 users in the platform. Talk to us a little bit about your life before Dash0 as being like the person that gets pulled into every incident, and like what like an incident looks like now versus then. I'd say like other than if your whole team is at a brewery having fun and you're the only sober one to answer the incident happening.
Yeah, so being an SRE, obviously in the job title is reliability. So I think at this point I've been a part of every Sev1 in the last 2 years, which that's just kind of comes with the job. And they're usually pretty intense, like dashboards down, customers upset, APIs down, the kind of like war room-esque environments that, you probably got a CTO pinging you, or your CEO happens to be called by some GM of a customer, and then, he's emailing various people. Many people have probably been in that scenario. And the challenge of sort of before Dash0 is we would dig around in dashboards and dashboards are inherently static. You kind of need to know exactly what you're after. And when you have a really complex, ultimately ours is a microlith by definition, but it's a fairly complex system. It's truly hard to understand how data comes in the system, how data goes out the system. I don't think any single person at iSpot still like fully understands that. But when the tensions are high, like we've had 4 hours of dashboard being down in the middle of the day, and to some, if there's no dashboard, like we might as well not exist. Really the goal that I have is I don't want to be the person always on call. I want to train other people to do that. I just so happen to be brought into incidents because I was able to actually solve them. At the end of the day, having all this rich data plus LLMs, MCPs, now I can talk about how do I build like a SRE agent, which is kind of a buzzy word. But the goal is I want to empower everyone on the SRE, and then the next goal is everyone in engineering to have all this insights, so when they get paged, they're automatically given a dashboard or some context as to what happened. Better would be if we get those signals, how do we fix that problem before it even manifests to a problem? And then even better is basically the auto-healing type of scenario, though in reality, we're a little far away from that. But yeah, I want to bring that like rich context. So when you get woken up at 2 a.m., you're not like digging around in dashboards. You have a link to click. You have some thinking to decide, does this make sense? But you're immediately brought context in the first minute or so, and then we can hopefully get these incidents resolved in 15 minutes, and we can all go back to bed.
Thanks, Josh. Mirko, Josh's vision's fairly clear here, right? He essentially wants every engineer to have the context and the tribal knowledge that he has to help democratize the troubleshooting process and have other folks on his team have the level of expertise that he has. I'm curious how like Agent Zero addresses this and like where exactly Agent Zero is at currently today and where we're heading.
Yeah, first of all, I want to say that we see two types of customers at the moment. I would say, Josh, you are very sophisticated. You are building your own agents and you use the MCP server, and we see that a lot. So there is the category of customers who essentially never log into our UI anymore, right? They use Claude Desktop or whatever. They do prompts, and I don't really like it, right? Because we spend so much time in the UI, etc. But I think it's the new reality, right? The new reality is that a lot of sophisticated users will use us through an MCP server. They will build their own agents. They will use their own agent frameworks, etc. to build that. And I remember when we visited you in Seattle, you talked about these steering documents, I think you called them, where you document procedures and your architecture, etc., which you can then feed into the agents to basically give the knowledge to that agent, right, that you are building. I think that's one part. Agent Zero is basically an agent that we are building on top of our MCP server, so that you don't have to build your own agent anymore, and it has all those features that do troubleshooting. It can create dashboards inside of the tool. It can create alerts. It has memory. It has a knowledge base also. And that's kind of what we are building inside of the tool. By the way, also pretty soon, you can also connect to it via MCP, because I think what we will see is more agent-to-agent communication. You have your agent, but then you can call Agent Zero via MCP and use our functionality. And the other thing we are providing is triggers. So triggers are events inside of the system. Could be an alert, could be a deployment that's happening, or a specific error log that's coming, and that will trigger an agent that then does something, right? Analyze the problem, or even create a to fix the issue, right? Or have a regular call to an agent that, I don't know, once a week does a profiling analysis to see if there's any CPU optimization you can make and creates a PR for it. So we will have Agent Zero doing that, but I'm seeing more and more also customers building their own agents via the MCP server.
Awesome. Josh, let's talk a little bit about Sage, right? We just talked about some of Dash0's AI capabilities. I think it's important to and my understanding of Sage is essentially it's serving customers that are spending like millions of dollars on either Super Bowl ads or other types of advertising and basically asking your AI for insights on the creative. And I'm curious how observability shifts from your perspective as the user of the tools towards what are some of the insights you're looking for to understand the behavior or other things that would be critical for you as you're trying to observe agents rather than, we'll call it traditional telemetry like metrics, traces, and logs.
Yeah, so sort of iSpot's background on Sage. So Sage is really AI-ifying all of our products. So in the more ADA native space, iSpot's value is really our data, and the challenge that Sage addresses is the accessibility to that data because it's very complex. And historically, it's done through static dashboards, which will turn into agentic interfaces here pretty fast. Our more sophisticated customers usually call our API and then do a lot of complex data engineering. But Sage is really a product of all of our products to address. We want to provide these deep insights. So we want to make all of our customers as sophisticated as our big enterprise customers. And really it comes down to agents and semantic views and data. And at some point we're going to need to scale up our AWS infrastructure to handle all this new MCP traffic and web traffic because now we have agents talking to agents. But we're a little far away from that. Right now we're still sort of gaining the trust of the customer, which is addressing the human in the loop. And we have such rich data that when you throw like an Opus level model on top of it, you get these key insights, which is driving effectively the return on ad spend at the end of the day that everyone wants to achieve. But at the end of the day, these are agents talking to agents, non-deterministic. They can go off the track. If they say, go optimize your spend by $1 million by doing this action, how do I trust it? That's a pretty major ask back to a human. At this point, in my opinion, if you're running agents in production without OTel, you don't have a business strategy at all. You're effectively not strategizing. So going with OTel is required because you got to understand what those agents are actively doing, especially back to the human, and then more so in the agent-to-agent scenario. So as of today, our whole Sage product line is all instrumented in OTel, and it's all feeding into Dash0. I can tell what any of our customers are doing at any point, and what the prompt was, the data polls, the data responses, the sentiment. Did they like the response? Did they dislike the response? Are they frustrated? All that is really driven through the Dash0 MCP. Not that the sort of Dash0 UI is not awesome in itself, but Mirko would say a more advanced user. But the key to this is that's all the engineering stuff. The sort of next level that I want to bring is, so our CEO, as most CEOs or all CEOs, all they want to talk about is AI. Our CEO loves Cloud Desktop. And what's interesting now is I have all this rich OTel data backed by Dash0. This is actually a form of business intelligence. This is data that I need to give to our CRO. All of our customer-facing individuals should have access to this data because now I can see what customers are doing effectively in real time, and we could reach out periodically or proactively, or when we schedule like QBRs, we would actually understand what they're doing in production, and it can go into solutioning much faster. We could say, how much sort of rich, deeper conversations very quickly. And I've seen some of our, like all of our internal business folks use this in their day-to-day jobs to ultimately service the customer as well. I can see all that just instantly. And it's really OTel and MCP and at the end of the day. So it kind of goes beyond just simple, this is how you operationalize agents in production to it's a whole business intelligence layer to make data-driven decisions across the whole business.
Awesome. A couple more questions and then I'll open it up to the group. Josh, this initially started by replacing Datadog. We were able to add APM into the scope. Now we've started this journey of consolidating your logs and displacing Splunk. So I'm curious, what does tool consolidation mean to your team? And how has this helped iSpot as a business?
Sure. So probably like most here, we don't do necessarily the ideal state, which is, in my mind, observability is only truly complete when it's in one system, when it's truly observable, when you have your logs, masters, and traces all together. Historically, this predated me before iSpot, is we use Splunk as our log system, and then we would pull other signals into Datadog. At the end of the day, it needs to be on the one platform. One of the challenges is always the financials, but because of the OTel patterns of the OTel library in our code, the OTel collector, we've started effectively dual forwarding logs from Splunk and then Dash0, and then we're doing sort of a parallel approach, making sure they're at parity, and then shutting off the Splunk integration. So the goal here is reduced ROI to us as a business, and then increase usability by having all this unified data in one stack. And then haven't really been a fan of Splunk's MCP. It keeps not working for me, but at the end of the day, it's all that data is in Dash0. And Splunk is it's a big tool, and we're just using it for like a tiny piece of the puzzle, which is just logs. So when we get the tool consolidation done, it'll make my CFO happy, because we'll reduce our spend out the door, and then it'll make my CTO happy and our CRO happy, because we'll be able to reduce incidents and react to when they do happen. Get our MTTR up to minutes instead of hours at the end of the day.
Awesome. Mirko, Josh mentioned that CEOs love talking about AI and love talking about Claude. We talked a bit about AI for your observability with AI SRE agents. Talk to us a bit about observability for your AI and how Dash0 plans to help customers that are adopting tools like Claude and other AI tools.
Sure. As a side note, I was on a CEO offsite with our VC 2 weeks ago, and the big thing now is that you have to compare your token burn, right? It's like everybody's asking, how much tokens are you burning, right? And the more you burn, the better, right? If you don't burn a lot, you're doing something wrong, right? So that's the new thing, and that creates some FOMO. That's why we are only talking about AI. But what we are releasing is essentially in 2 weeks we are coming out, but the first part is Claude Code Observability, because one of the things I learned when we started using Claude Code is that you kind of lose sight and control of for what you are spending all that money and how effective it is. And so we are now, and Cloud Code, by the way, is OpenTelemetry instrumented. So Cloud Code sends all the information via OTel, spans, metrics, logs. And so we built an analytics tool over it so that you can see which developer is spending how much, which code is created. Is that code actually deployed into production? So are you creating waste with those tokens, or are you creating really something which becomes something that is in production, is running? How many problems are you creating with that code? Was it reviewed? How was it reviewed? So get an insight in the whole process, in the whole harness, coding harness essentially, and having full visibility into cost, token burn, etc. That's coming out in 2 weeks, and overall, I think we want to really close that loop, right? Also look into reviewing tools, CI/CD tools, and closing the loop for those agents with observability.
Josh, last question. Right, you've been an absolute pleasure to work with, and again, thank you for making time for this. If you were talking to one of your peers at another organization who was staring down either a Datadog renewal or some other expensive observability renewal, that was curious about OpenTelemetry, but a bit nervous or apprehensive of the lift it would take to move on to OpenTelemetry, what would you tell them?
I mean, our sort of results speak for themselves. We were able to go basically no OTel presence to full OTel presence to full migrate off of Datadog in 30 days. And that would be considered very risky in many forms of the word, mostly because we had an imminent event of Super Bowl around the corner. And if you miss Super Bowl, like nothing else truly matters to the company because it's just that big of a volume. I think when I graphed like our total volume of impressions, if you put Super Bowl anywhere in that graph, it becomes impossible to see anything. It's basically a flat line every other day of the week. So that's just how it's the Black Friday of all advertising at the end of the day. So the fact that we were able to do that in such a small window, especially around Christmas, people pay PTO, etc. We were able to turn around a contract, basically tell Datadog we're turning them off, and actually achieve that with effectively a skeleton crew. We didn't have all of our SRE staff working on this. We only had some. Part of that was because we had access to Vitor, being an awesome sort of partner solutions architect that was given to us. I don't know who approved that, but it was nice for free. That sort of sealed the deal, allowed us to get that all into production very quickly. I don't think I've done a migration of that magnitude ever and been successful. Usually you miss something or cut corners, but we didn't cut any corners. It was a big celebration by all definitions of the word.
It's funny you talked about missing the Super Bowl being, a big thing for you guys. Mirko decided to organize our annual kickoff and have us all fly home on the day of the Super Bowl. So most of us in the U.S. actually almost missed the Super Bowl. Fortunate for Josh, his Seahawks beat up on my New England Patriots. So I was glad that I was jet lagged. And now we have our next offsite on 4th of July. No, I'm just kidding. A couple days after. But anyways, Josh, thank you. Mirko, thank you guys for making the trip. I'll open it up now to the group for any questions, any thoughts, any feedback. And I'll just run the mic to whoever has questions and wants to ask.
Hi, thank you so much. You spoke a lot about like ingestion, ingress costs. AWS is very famous for its egress costs, moving data out of AWS centers. Have you ever thought about what techniques you might use in general for maybe reducing that cost if you're just piping out many terabytes of data?
That's a great question. I think this one's for Mirko.
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, two things. First, we do not charge for ingress. We only charge for what you store. So if you remove things in ingress or during, but you still have the egress cost, right? So sending the data to us, and you are right. Depending on the size that you have, our largest customer, as an example, Zalando, it's a German-based e-commerce player. They would have paid $3 million a year only in egress just to drop, because they sample around 5%, basically drop 95% in the pipeline, but you still pay the egress. And so what we build is, and the product is called, is it there? Smart filtering. We call it Intelligent Edge. It's especially, you have this hotel collector, and we have a special version of that, which then drops the data already inside of your cloud or system, so that you don't have to send them to us. So we can do tail sampling of these things, smart filtering inside of your cloud, so that you don't have to send the data and you don't pay the egress. I mean, you pay the egress for the 5%. So in this case, it's $100,000 instead of $3 million a year, but you don't pay the full egress cost. But that only makes sense, the complexity of the collectors, if you have a big amount of data, right? I would say like a few 100,000 or so.
Good question. Any other questions? Any from the Dash0 side of things? I'll get back to you in one sec, but
Thanks. You talk a lot about why you started working with Dash0, how obviously they helped you migrate over from Datadog. What do you think are the top 2 or 3 reasons why you'll continue to work with them from what you've seen now that you've been a customer?
So as a sort of a budget owner, I have to be reasonable in my finances. Dash0's transparent billing, the smart filtering, for example, we're sort of below the threshold of our CFO caring, to be honest. He's got bigger things to care about. And that's really an understatement. It's really important, because now my accounting team wants to talk about AI spend and all this other stuff. So good problems to have. The other one is the no contract. I mean, that's kind of a big deal, because in theory I could say, see you Dash0, I'm going to go somewhere else. I don't think I've worked with a vendor that doesn't have a contract. And again, it makes it really easy for us, because procurement is a breeze. It's below a threshold. I don't have to do any complex accounting procurement stuff that takes, I feel like it takes us 60 to 90 days to go through the process. And then it's built on AWS Marketplace, which again, it just makes it so much less friction. And then on the engineering side, because it's OTel native, and I can directly talk to product owners on the Dash0 side, provide all sorts of feedback. I've talked to many of them. I'm pretty happy with what we have today. I'm happy with the roadmap. One of the areas I didn't really go into is the Agent Zero improvements. I want all of engineering to basically think like I do, which is, at the end of the day, it's workflow and steering, and then providing additional context to effectively Agent Zero. I don't want people to build dashboards by hand. I want it to be driven through either through Terraform, through like I said, we use a lot of Kiro, or I'm investigating an event and it just builds it for me, or I need to build something bespoke for an incident, etc. And that's all driven through Agent Zero at the end of the day. And the nice thing is these aren't add-ons, if you will, so you don't feel like you're losing out, because of billing friction, etc. So it's really, the finances is like step one, and all of that is, like I said, just I don't really want to talk to our CFO about some of this stuff. So he's happy, I'm happy.
You might have just briefly touched on this, but while you have like Mirko's ear, if there was a magic wand you could wave and something that you want us to build that would like dramatically change your day-to-day happiness, is there anything that comes to mind? Maybe you just touched on it right now. But.
I think the at the end of the day, agents or LLMs in a loop at the very most basic level, and then providing data such as OpenTelemetry is the moat, if you will, and then the workflow is the power. I think the value is the magic wand is about to happen. So it's we have all this rich data, let's action it. And like I said before, it's actually an entire my business leaders don't think about it, it's an entire new BI layer that we're sitting on. Because now we have all these agentic applications in production. We're soon going to launch MCPs to our customers. And that's just another layer of business intelligence. And I plan to use Agent Zero where it makes sense. Building those workflows for on-call, building workflows so that when we build new services through Terraform, etc., it's just all kind of done. It has standards, it's hardened, it's mature. We don't have to sit in, incident review and go, well, I didn't have a dashboard built, or we missed an alarm, that kind of stuff. So.
Yeah, so this sort of extends on your question from before. Earlier you said that the hot new trend is to spend as many tokens as possible. Token maxing, I believe it's called. And I think investors love that, of course, especially if you're an investor in Anthropic. I think actually in the opposite side, the less tokens you can use with the better result is actually better. Not only are you paying Anthropic less, but you're probably getting an answer more coherent or whatever. What's new in the pipeline for Agent Zero? What are you doing to we only received, for example, recently, the 1 million token from Opus. Quite expensive still, in comparison. I want to reduce the amount of stuff I can put in that context so I can fill it with more relevant stuff. What are you doing sort of in the techniques or Agent Zero, all these kind of things that are maybe helping maybe reduce it or just improving the product in general?
Yeah, that's a good question. And we first of all, we give you insights, right? We give you insights in what's happening, as Josh has told you. If you use OpenTelemetry, and most of the models are instrumented with OpenTelemetry, there's it's called Gen AI semantic convention. So it's an extension of the semantic convention of OpenTelemetry for Gen AI and models, and there's one for Anthropic for all the other models. And with that data, you can already ask those questions through an MCP or through Agent Zero. You can ask, okay, how is my efficiency per model, or give me an overview of the results by model that I'm using. So that's already possible. But we are also coming with more specific observability tools exactly for that use case, comparing things, doing evaluations, etc., in the tool. But I think OTel and the Gen AI specification is kind of the foundational layer that you need for that to get all the insights.
Hello. This might be a question for Josh. You said something during the conversation that something along the lines of, with OpenTelemetry, you can actually tell what your customer is struggling with or what they're going to be bumping up against. And to me, that almost seemed like, getting feedback without asking for feedback. And that's, to me, it's really interesting. I don't know if I hallucinated that, but can you expand on that?
So, I wish on my laptop I could just live demo this. It's that easy. A lot of times our customers are there. So I'll put on my iSpot product pitch for a second. One of our goals is to make our customers sticky. So the key is I want to make it so that they buy into iSpot and then they use it all the time. It becomes like an efficiency gain, and then renewals happen and they go, I can't live without it. We're not going to turn. We're not going to downsize. I want to increase my contract value. That's kind of the holy grail of, if I were to put my CRO hat on, that's what I want to do. When our customers are interacting currently with a chat interface, because we need to gain that human trust, if you will. We have our customers are not the most technical. Our target is like a CMO, marketing analyst, business analyst. They're in charge of really big budgets. They have to make a lot of decisions. Sometimes it's kind of just guessing at the end of the day, but you're guessing with $200 million. So hopefully you guess right. But ultimately that's part of what iSpot brings to the equation, is the insights to, guess right more often than not. But when a customer interacts with a Sage, we log every piece of the puzzle. So they might start with a prompt of, show me my top 5 performing ads by likability, which is a KPI from us. It's key to the creative process. So to sort of summarize part of that business is, I saw an ad. We respond to a number of signals to drive this KPI of likability. I could probably talk about that for 30 minutes in itself, but ignoring that, the advertiser wants to understand, we had all this historic data. We know what ads drove high likability. What is my next ad going to be? And this is all done through a chat interface. And we're using, at the end of the day, we're actually doing a lot of ML, because we're keeping the LLMs rooted in our data, which we sit on this, we have a vast data moat. Really what they're tapping into is an insights, if you will, of their historical data, which is effectively true because it happened. And now they want to build a new creative, and they understand vaguely what their brand succeeded at. So for example, some brands use dogs in their advertising. People respond very positively to dogs. Surprise. But they're using our platform to sort of start the creative process, and all that is logged. I understand what's going on. If it returns like an error, that could be frustrating, like a timeout, like a model timeout, etc. I wanted to drive like the account management team to like have all this data at their fingertips, so when a customer emails them, they can, instead of being reactive, like I had this problem, can you help me understand, am I doing something wrong, to being I meant to say reactive, to be like proactive, which is, we see you're frustrated, can we hop on a call and understand your use case better or something, right? And ultimately that's trying to drive that stickiness to the customer. And then the other part is like this data moat that we have. We can drive a number of. I talked about a return on ad spend. Kind of the next phase of the business is I could directly tie from the creative level, which is the ad itself. I can go beyond that and be at the pre-creative level, So we can effectively optimize the creative spend. So it takes money to make an ad. But what if we told them what their storyboard should be, and instead of them wasting $5 million, we turn that waste into $1 million because we sit on this data. At the end of the day, it's the ML LLMs, and then when we don't have data, we can be more proactive. And really, that's just using OTel. So.
We might have time for one more question if anybody has one. Otherwise, we can wrap up. You got another one? Okay. The final question. A lot of pressure.
I'll make it a good one. So you mentioned that your stack is Python or mostly Python, and I work on a stack that's mostly Java, and I like OpenTelemetry because it has an agent that almost gives you the ability to not have to instrument anything, and a whole bunch of data will get to whatever system is getting that OpenTelemetry data. And I was wondering, when you did the migration, did you have to cover for any gaps? Because I am seeing a lot of those gaps when I'm trying to do my POCs, and instrumenting that is not a realistic task for one single person, and it's a difficult conversation to have to ask for resources to cover that gap. Now I'm wondering if you sort of face similar issues there.
Yeah, so I primarily talked about Python, but we also run a lot of Java, specifically Spring Boot. The way we capture all of this rich data is actually many Java microservices at the end of the day. And they're distributed across geo locations, et cetera. And the goal of them is, part of what iSpot brings is, we actually saw the ad as people saw it. And we can, our data is rich enough that we can defend it. And we catalog basically every ad that I've seen across any of our monitored networks, which sounds very fancy, but at the end of the day, it's a number of Java services listening to like a multicast tuner feed, or we're basically doing a bunch of FMMPEG under the hood in these Java services. But the MP4s get sort of transcoded from there between audio and textual. We run them through a number of LLMs that are also Java-based, actually. And then we get all this metadata, and then that sort of forms our ad catalog as the basis of our entire platform. Because all of our insights are driven from the actual, what people saw in the wild, including any errors, et cetera. But in terms of your question, so this is kind of the problem we experienced as we just sort of threw OTel in there and saw what happened. How far can you get? At this point, we were firmly in like cloud code territory. So basically what I did is I sort of thought about the problem myself for a few hours, and then I at the end of the day, I used a lot of cloud code to get this done. So I provided a number of context to it, so it wasn't just sort of blindly doing it. I specifically said these are the key parts of the code base that we need to instrument. And after a few iterations and some spec-driven development, some frustration, not getting the right result, throwing it away, starting over. At the end of the day, and this might sound way too fancy than it actually is, in a couple days I was able to tackle that myself, just through we talked about token maxing. I probably burned several thousand Opus tokens trying to do this. But it was business critical. I didn't want any hiccups to the migration. I didn't want anyone saying, we can't do this in 30 days. So I just kind of took the opportunity and took care of it myself. But I don't think there's a magic answer. I think it's providing context to your coding agent to achieve your objective. The auto instrumentation is not quite there. It'd be nice if it was like fully auto instrumented, but at the end of the day, like writing, I don't really write code anymore. I haven't written code myself in 8 months at least. It's all about the planning in your specs, and then examining the results at the end. If results don't work, throw the code away, start over, fix the plan, and keep going down that loop, which you can drive a lot of change very fast. I write a lot of code. I can make some people uncomfortable with how many PRs get opened across very critical services. But so that's kind of the answer to your question, if you will.
Really quickly, do you use OpenSpec or something like that?
We do a lot of. I didn't really talk about this, but Mirko kind of touched on it. They have a cloud code observability framework. I actually imported that into Kiro because we're fully a Kiro shop because we're AWS customer. I don't really use any specific framework. What I did is I kind of built my own AI harness that I distributed to all of engineering. And again, this sounds more fancy than it actually is, but really it's a pattern. So I basically told people it's important to do planning, and this is where you're going to spend 80% of your time. This is what I want you to spend on, and here's how you go about it. And then I put guardrails and called in tests, adversarial judges, all the good patterns that most of us probably have talked about for many months now. And then I beefed up our integration tests at the other end to understand, is this actually impactful, et cetera. Observing that behavior is sort of the next phase of maturity. What I've actually seen, because AWS also provides insights into token burn down in Kiro, et cetera, is I find a lot of engineers who sort of use the biggest model possible and then don't really make any, further educated decisions. But it's okay. I find that Opus likes to do sub-agents, et cetera, and it leads to a lot of token waste because the sub-agents just time out, don't get it right, et cetera. You're also using like a big model to do code implementation. Like, I'm a big fan of Minimax right now as a model for code implementation. But the reason that works so well is you have a defined spec, and that's where Opus is quite valuable. And then on the other end, on the verification, again, I'll call an Opus to, do an adversarial pass and run my unit test, my integration tests, understand systemic change, et cetera. I wouldn't say it's perfect, but it's kind of the maturity curve, if you will, that we're actively doing right now.
Cool. Well, Mirko, Josh, thank you so much for the time. Folks in the crowd, thank you for your participation. Hopefully you guys found this informative and interesting. Feel free to help yourself to any food, beverages, and if you have any questions at all, whether it be about iSpot, Dash0, or OpenTelemetry, find one of us and feel free to ask away. Thank you so much for the time today.